As a technologist, and I've had the fortunate opportunity to be a technologist for large multinationals, and I've thought about technology and the use of technology for shared innovation, right? For collaboration, but fundamentally to enable access and to enable economic choice. Because I think the ability to enable choice and then to enable people to make those choices becomes unbelievably powerful when we think about transformation. And while I will be speaking a lot about some of the digital aspects, my focus is going to be around some of the containers that we need to think about and how those potentially can create value, shared value, because the intellectual diversity in the room has the opportunity for that. I just want to check if my slide deck is queued up. And I want to introduce you, first of all, to a gentleman, two gentlemen. First of all, Nick Benadel, that used to be responsible for this institution. And then my Khoisan ancestor. I am Khoisan, right? So I'm from the original people of this area. And so one of the Khoisan ancestors I want to introduce you to is Cobra. And yeah, Cobra is coming. Not snakes on a plane. So one of the fundamental things that Cobra talks about, and Cobra still takes people on long walks between South Africa and Botswana, and takes them on these long walks to introduce them to elephants. And introducing them to elephants, there's a number of things that they discover. But one of the first lessons that you learn from Cobra is the fact, you can go to the slide of Cobra if you can, right? But one of the first things that you learn from Cobra is how to behave as an ancestor. And I think part of the lessons about learning to behave as an ancestor, make sure that we balance three expectations. And if you think about these three chairs, Cobra talks about the fact that late at night, when you're sitting around the fire, there are three places always left vacant around the fire. And the first place left vacant around the fire is for your current customers. And doesn't matter which industry you are in, you always have customers. But those are for the current customers. That's the first seat around the fire. The second seat around the fire that Cobra leaves is for the unborn customer. And Cobra talks about the fact that what we need to make sure of is that we don't mortgage our future on the current customer for the future customer. That's Cobra in his eyes. Great, thank you. And you can see the blue tinge to Cobra's eyes, right? Would you expect a Khoisan to have blue eyes? So that's the first thing, right? It's a very interesting thing. So the second seat around the fire is reserved for the unborn customer. The third seat around the fire is reserved for everything natural, for the air, for the water, for the earth. And so to be in balance is about making sure that you balance your current customer, your unborn customer, and everything natural. And so as a context, not for digital transformation, but for transformation, I think if around your boardroom tables or around your coffee room tables, as you make decisions, think about how you balance those three. So that's my first call to action. How disruptive do we want to be this afternoon? I just want to check. Are we wanting to be disruptive? Because if we're wanting to be disruptive, I have an activity. Because it doesn't help me standing up here talking. I want you to talk. But I want you to come and give me some feedback. So I will be very disruptive. And I'm going to ask us to take a walk for 5 minutes. That's it. But what we have to do is we have to be disciplined to exit the place and then to enter the place. So your first task is find someone, and especially if you're from Belgium, find a South African or any other African that is here to have a conversation with. Right? So that's the first thing. You're going to take, once you're out of the door, you're going to take 2.5 minutes to walk around the beautiful sunshine here, 2.5 minutes out, 2.5 minutes back, and then you can come back into the room. But the question that I want to ask is, how and why did you get into this room? Because one of the things that Cobra teaches is it is important to understand how people get into the room. But there's a further call to action based on commerciality. It is important how you leave the room, because we want you to leave the room connected. We want you to leave the room having experienced or expressed some opinions around what opportunities there are. So first task, find someone you want to have a conversation with. 5-minute walk. 2.5 minutes that way, 2.5 minutes back. And I'm going to pick on some people at random. Yeah. To not tell me about your experience, but I want to see how well you have listened to the other person. And what I want you to answer is, how and why did you get into the room? Are we clear? You have a minute to find someone. Let's snap to it. 6 minutes for this exercise. Let's get to it. Find someone, take them and walk. It's really important that you walk, right? Really important that you walk. Go for a walk, quickly, quickly. To you for this evening when we get to the networking session. Women were better than the men. You're just better because your hemispheres are better connected, right? Left and hemisphere. That's anatomically correct, right? It's the truth. But the thing that I ask you is, find someone else during dinner and the networking this evening and answer this question, which is not about getting into the room, it is about leaving the room. As you leave the room, what is the one thing that you will do in order to get people inspired by purpose? Whatever that purpose is, right? The amazing thing about these short conversations is we always think that we need an hour to say something. And part of the reason why I ask you to walk is that when you walk, I'm going to stay at the mic. I don't have a mobile one. When you walk, it hijacks your lower brainstem. Because the lower brainstem is hijacked because you have to have the fine motor neuron control about where you put your foot to understand the terrain so that you don't break your ankles or something else. And so because you hijack your lower brainstem, it exposes your top brainstem, these big hemispheres here. And because it exposes your top brainstem, it makes you more productive. Run this experiment. I used to have an hour one-on-one with a team member at one of these large law firms that I worked at. And in an hour, sitting adversarially across from each other, we used to get through 1.5 conversations. While walking, because we hijack the old brain and allow the new brain to emerge, we had on average 5 conversations. A digital context is not about addition, it is about multiplication. And if there's nothing you get out of this evening, your ability to think about how to multiply. My boss at the large law firm, our core process used to take us 7 months. From implementing digital technologies and being able to interact and connect with customers, it went down to 3 weeks. And my boss said to me, it's good enough. As a digital designer, I understand it is not good enough. It is only good enough when it is frictionless and when it is instantaneous. Because when it is frictionless and very then we have the opportunity to use digital economics. And I'll talk about digital economics very quickly. And part of the reason why this is so important, we always forget that the opportunity that digital capability offers is for us to have incredible conversations. Walter Truett Anderson talks about the fact that organizations, the world, your family is a linguistic structure built out of words and maintained by conversations. Even problems that strictly aren't communicational, failures in mechanical systems, IT, can be explored in terms of things said and not said, questions asked and not asked, conversations never begun. we have the opportunity through technology to have this type of conversation. But not only that, we can catalog the conversation and we can then extract actionable insights from the conversation. In real time, both at the large OEM that I worked for and at the law firm, we could say to a lawyer, your customer sentiment has decreased significantly. Can you reference why the sentiment has decreased so significantly so that we can talk about how to redress in real time? That's the opportunity that digital technology has in terms of conversations. You all know about the VUCA thing, but one of the fundamental things that you have to think about, and this is why digital design becomes so important. And so one of the fundamental collaborations is to bring our African mindset and our European mindset together and fuse them in this design opportunity, right? I know Abdullah Varachia, who teaches here, always speaks about this. The problem is not the turbulence, but the fact that we work on yesterday's logic. And so one of the things that we have to ask ourselves is, what is the appropriate logic? Not for today, but for tomorrow. Don't depart from today's logic. And I think that opportunity, because of the stuff that I've seen at the Belgium campus, because of the stuff that I've seen around the way Belgium does identity and access management to make sure that a customer can execute a transaction online, which is a huge problem that we have as South Africans, right? We ask you to jump through crazy hoops just to change your bank account details. If we had a way to authenticate you easily, that authentication will mean that you can do the transaction. And it means that we can get away from a physical transaction into, once again, these digital transactions. Because that's what delight is. That's what the tech can do. This is a picture from a place between Botswana and Namibia for this tribe. We had delivered broadband connectivity here, and these kids are watching, and I don't want to do inadvertent marketing for some cartoon companies, but they're watching this cartoon that only they've heard of for the first time. The ability to create delight, but we often focus delight just for our customers. Focus on delight for your employees, because statistically speaking, when your employees are delighted, they create loyal customers. And it's called the service profit chain. When I worked for a large bank, we knew that a 1% improvement in employee engagement led to a 3% improvement in customer engagement and loyalty. But interestingly, economically, it translated to a 1% improvement in bottom line profit. Now, if that isn't a business case good enough, then yeah, I haven't done my job. So what's medicine for VUCA? Hoping my pointer works. Okay, doesn't look like it. So this is the medicine for VUCA. And you noticed earlier on, VUCA was bookended by 2D. So disruption is characterized by VUCA, but the second D is about diversity and inclusion. And a friend of mine always talked about diversity and inclusion in the following manner. Diversity is being asked to the dance. Inclusion is actually dancing. And this is why when you went outside and you walked and you came back in, you saw the conversation in the room, right? You're starting to form community already. But from a design perspective, why we want to start with the vision, and often in organizations that embark on these digital journeys, start with the vision. But in human-centered design, we start with understanding, not our own understanding. We go to the people that we are trying to do something for, and we ask them, what do you need done? Let me walk in your moccasins, right? Or in my Nikes, you'll have to have some big size 14s to do that, right? But this ability to start with the understanding, and once you have that immersive understanding, then to cast the vision. And because then the vision is inclusive in terms of the way the population wants you to solve the problem. But it doesn't stop there. Then you form this tight cycle between understanding and vision and understanding, because that tight cycle gives you the common intellectual ground from which to depart. And that common intellectual ground is the fundamental thing that enables the clarity. Because I can expect people then when they act from this common ground. And once again, digital technology has this incredible ability for us to have these conversations in real time, to catalog them, but more importantly, when somebody else comes to the organization, they can then come and consume the way we arrived at our strategic intent because of the fact that this conversation is transparent. But doesn't stop at the clarity, right? Because of the fact that we can act with clarity and act with clarity because of the common ground we have, now we can act with agility because all of us are acting from the same common ground. I said to you, digital is about acceleration. Just to show you in terms of the product economy to the digital era, and of course beyond this now there's the algorithmic era, the cadence of digital refresh that is required. And so if nothing else, the ability to use each other as a human sensor network to constantly learn will put you in a position to be able to get to the type of insight that you need to get to in order to deal within the algorithmic era. This is why a digital context demands multiplication. Addition does not work. Addition doesn't cut the mustard. You know, one of the incredible things is that one of my contentions, and it's being borne out by research, is that synthesis is the antidote for complexity. That means that sharing, that collaboration, becomes the basis from which we respond. But now comes the challenge. We have to ask ourselves, what are the digital dividends that we could potentially utilize in order to create transformation? What do you think are digital dividends? If you think about your organization, or if you think about how to scale any digital capability, what is a digital dividend that we could develop? Don't shout all at once. Have I confused you with the question? My boss tells me sometimes I'm very confusing. But think about what a digital dividend is, right? I have a customer journey, I have an employee journey. When I understand where the customer journey interacts with the employee journey, is that not a point of leverage? Remember, digital is about multiplication. It is not about addition. So part of the opportunity is, as you look at your platforms, as you look at your technology, don't think about your customer experience in isolation with your employee experience. And in cities, as we think about infrastructure, sometimes we underestimate the impact of a network, right? And any network technician, any techie will tell you a bigger network is more efficient than a smaller network. So the more points you have on the network, not only does it make the network more stable, but it provides for more variety in the network. And so one of the things I would say to you is that whether you think about, and there's a number of people from the city here, when Lihle is also from the city, right? So the opportunity to find where your customer journey is supported by your employee journey becomes a digital dividend. But one of the other things, of course, is education, right? And is innovation. So as you think about how to be able to deliver innovation in your organization, into your customer, start from the outside in. I'm going to forget about all of these. Just a really simple definition. And when you go in the world, you will find numerous definitions of digital transformation. Pick a definition that makes sense to you. But I like this one because it illustrates two core capabilities: business model and this issue about digital economics. To demonstrate this issue around digital economics, this is the top 10 causes, and this is something that has been built by Africans. And specifically, a couple, with some participation here, focusing on these are the top 10 causes of death in South Africa. It's quite morbid. 8 of these causes are preventable. Other ones, like accident, of course, I mean, it's a chance. It's chance. So what we did was to create an e-triage algorithm. And so we just essentially took the South African disease guidelines and produced an algorithm for it. We then took the algorithm and we understood what type of sensor, and there's some IoT people in the room, some IoT, so Internet of Things or operational technology people in the room. When we take these sensors, a blood pressure sensor, a simple scale that allows people to stand on the scale to understand if they are dehydrated or not, and then of course just simple blood test. It's called a credit card blood test. It does about 100 tests. You just put on the microchip and it does about 100 different blood tests. And so this e-triage algorithm tries to make sure that we can get you to the type of health facility that you need to be, and it also tries to indicate if you should be triaged. That's what it does. I want to show you the complex user interface. So there's the backpack. It has a solar panel on the top. All of these sensors are mainly sourced from in and around the manufacturing ecosystem in Africa. But this community development worker can go to any place in the Eastern Cape and go and put these IoT devices on someone and then get an output. And I want to show you the complex user interface. The result the community development worker gets. See doctor immediately, the top one. You can wait a week, don't worry. And it's incredible how we've taken really complex artificial inference. I don't call it artificial intelligence because it is not intelligent yet. If you're going to come and argue with me, come and argue with me a bit later. But I call it artificial inference because artificial intelligence is an anthropomorphism. We cannot assign human characteristics to something that doesn't exist yet. But this is the user interface. And do you know what? It has decreased acute hospitalizations in the Eastern Cape health system to the extent to which they can almost deliver on the health budget that they have. How elegant is that? In conclusion, this is work recently from the Harvard Business Review, Why People Work. And I put this up because what our technology needs to do for people is to make sure that they can feel engaged at work. From the latest Gallup study, 17% of people are engaged at work. There's this R&B song that says, your body's here with me, but your mind is on the other side of town. A lot of people have that type of divorce, when they come to work. But in my organizations, one of the things that I always try and do for my teams is we kill ourselves for 4 days. On the 5th day, we decide what to play with. So we literally decide that we're going to play with this type of cloud technology, this algorithm, and we're going to try and figure it out. And all of us, not experts, go and do our homework, and we bring our little understanding and we play with that technology for an entire day with each other. The organization that I worked for had 0% of what they did in the cloud. Following this type of play, 98% of what they did is in the cloud, just because of play. Play has an unbelievable ability to release people's ingenuity. And that's part of the opportunity that we have between AI and, of course, human capability. Purpose. One of the things that Cobra always says is, when you think about these 3 seats, your current customers, your future customers, and all things natural, make sure that you don't mortgage one for the other, and make sure that you balance the interests between that. And I think that when you speak to the people that work for you, irrespective of how young or how old they are, when they find an entry point into your purpose as an organization, they will stay with you as long as you make compelling sense to them. And then, of course, the development of potential, and that's where Belgium, and especially the hub, has such a role to play, because of the fact that what we are able to do, and this is one of the fundamental digital dividends, right? This is the fundamental thing that multiplies our effort in being able to take an individual to develop their potential, and they don't need to get a degree or a piece of paper. We, for instance, took a group of young people off the street. We taught them how to maintain a network, and they kept our network up in parts of the city of Johannesburg in the Gauteng broadband network. 6 weeks to be able to maintain the network. What is the value of that? individuals have access to information and have access to economic opportunity where they are. And that's the opportunity with digital transformation. We have to think about our business models, rethink those, but fundamentally we move away from Malthusian economics to digital economics. Malthusian economics says that you cannot have infinite expansion in a finite world. Digital economics, as my boss said to me, 3 weeks is good enough. It is only good enough when it is frictionless and when it's instantaneous. And so remember, as I'm completing, my call to action for the networking drinks. Find someone, have the conversation about how will you leave the room based on what you've been exposed to.